This episode of the Topcast is presented in collaboration with our friends over at Sheet Music Plus.
With the serious ones, you can teach them how to read music, and when they know the fretboard and where the notes are and can play, then learning music is super simple. But if you're trying to do three things at once, how to read, how to play, and playing is coordinating two or three things at once, it's just going to be way too overwhelming for beginners.
Hi teachers, welcome back to the Topcast. This is episode number 256, our third in a three-part series with guitar teacher Michael Gumley. And today's episode is super cool because we're going to be really honing in on guitar teaching and talking about some common mistakes guitar teachers make, why most guitar teachers and guitar methods get things wrong, some ideas about gamification for guitars, and we talk about streaks, which is a great gaming term, important mindset shifts for guitar teachers and music teachers in general. And we talk a little bit about reading and sight reading and private versus group and all sorts of stuff. And as I've said in the last couple of parts of this series, today's episode is super relevant, obviously for guitar teachers, but I know teachers of every instrument will definitely get something from this. So I do encourage you to tune in. My guest today, Michael Gumley, runs the Melbourne Guitar Academy here in Melbourne and is our new head of guitar at Top Music as we build up to the launch of our TopMusicPro Guitar Teacher program. Can't wait to tell you more about that, and it's coming up really soon. But for now, let's jump in and welcome back Michael Gumley for part 3.
Glad to be back for part number 3, and I'd be more than happy to do part 4, 5, and 6 this week. So much fun.
I have been having a great time as well, and I hope listeners have been getting lots of nuggets of information, hopefully taking some notes. Make sure, guys, if you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2, that you head back and listen to those whenever you can. Part 1 was all about Michael's own story from guitar student to studio owner, very successful studio owner. And part 2 was all about general teaching strategies and tips, from things like mindset to money to bad and good students and setting goals. So today, Michael, we're going to be focusing more specifically on guitar teachers. So hopefully for all the guitar teachers out there, this will be really relevant. Even if you're not a guitar teacher, one thing I've learned over the years of going to workshops and masterclasses is that I can pretty much learn anything and be able to relate it to what I'm doing. So please don't switch off. If you're not a guitar teacher, I have a feeling there'll be many things that you can still pick up today. All right, let's jump straight in, Michael. First question. We all make mistakes. I've got a very popular blog post about the 6 biggest mistakes I made as a piano teacher. What are some of the mistakes you see guitar teachers making?
The biggest one is trying to get guitar students to learn how to read music and to sight read, basically from the beginning. And this is perpetuated by the fact that every single method book you buy, whether it's the Helen Leonard method or I don't know the exact one in Australia that's super popular, but it's like Koala Publishing or something. But they all start with, here's how you read the notes. And then you learn notes on the first string, E, F, and G. And then after a couple of weeks, you can play Old MacDonald Had a Farm, which is absolutely riveting for most beginner guitar players.
Yay!
So I always say that, especially with guitar, because piano, you put your finger down and get the note. On guitar, one hand has to squeeze really hard, one hand has to do a different motion, and then you're trying to figure out which dot on which line or space which you got, rushed through 5 minutes earlier because your teacher wants you to get you playing straight away, equates to which part of the guitar. And, if anyone has ever learned how to drive a manual car and can remember back to their first ever driving experience and how traumatic that was, that's pretty much what most people's first guitar lessons are when they're being taught how to read music. Whereas I think a much better approach is just to go straight to guitar tabs or rote learning and simply get the student confident with playing, get them confident with their picking motion, their fretting motion, and then memorizing things, which is something we do very, very early on, is optimizing the memorization process, but just getting them not focused on how to read the music and how to actually play. And then 6 months down the track, when they can confidently play and they're more into guitar and they've gotten past the point where, they've decided whether they're going to stay on or not, then with the serious ones, you can teach them how to read music. And when they know the fretboard and where the notes are and can play, then learning music is super simple. But if you're trying to do 3 things at once, how to read, how to play, and playing is coordinating 2 or 3 things at once, it's just going to be way too overwhelming for beginners. Plus, most of the songs that you teach them in sight read are just not related or relevant to what they want to listen to.
Oh, hallelujah. I mean, it just aligns exactly with my notebook beginner's approach. Just leave the method books aside for a while, have some fun, get used to playing, improvise, clap, sing, jam, whatever it is. Do that for your first few weeks, at least months, before you get around to the reading. Please, teachers, if there's nothing else you take away from today's episode, do that. And I'm delighted that it relates so beautifully as well to guitar. That idea of rote learning some cool songs, learn Smoke on the Water, whatever it is, get them playing. Because, Michael, I don't know about in guitar, but when a student first sits at the piano, it's not necessarily an automatically natural thing that the height, the distance, what your fingers are meant to be doing, all that kind of stuff. So you're saying just the same on guitar. You've got to know how to sit, hold the guitar, hold your hand. What do you do with your thumb? How do you strum? So why complicate all of that with reading?
100%. And if you're teaching kids who are between the ages of 6 and maybe even 10 or 11, a lot of them still haven't finished developing their fine motor skills yet. So you're further complicating really difficult things that they're not used to doing. And on top of that, we all learn how to speak before we learn how to read and write. And most of the time, you're trying to teach someone who can't yet read and write English a whole other system of learning in the form of music. And if they can't read and write normally, then they don't yet have that aptitude. So, you're already pushing things uphill there. And this, disclaimer, before people turn out and go, oh, what's this nonsense they're talking? Learning how to read music is one of the most important skills you can have, and something we highly recommend and encourage for all musicians and all guitar players especially. But the beginning is just not the right time to do that. You want to make sure they're having fun, they're captivated, they're motivated, that they like what they're doing and can actually play. And then you come back and you teach the serious ones. And even then, unless you're going to be a professional musician in this day and age, most hobby players do not need to learn how to read music. And guitar's a bit different in the fact that we've got a system called tablature, which is basically a line grid system where put your finger where the number is and play it. I think when you combine that with rhythmic notation, it's really, really powerful. But you don't necessarily have to learn how to read music if you're going to be a hobby guitar player in this day and age.
I mean, I think that's a little bit. It's interesting. There's one of the differences, I think, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that we're not advocating that you never learn to read or you never learn to sight read. There is importance, and these are important skills for people to learn. It's just not. Let's just not do it first thing. On piano, I mean, most of us will move. Let's say we do some creative activities for a couple of months. Most of us will move to a method that therefore starts teaching students to read, and that's the approach that most people take, and I think that's fine. There are approaches that would have teachers, or some teachers might just teach students to play by ear, play chords, read chord lead sheets, sing along while they play, and those sorts of things. But probably less so than on guitar, I would think. But I have been accused in the past that, Tim Topman's that pop guy and he doesn't really do any theory and, classical or anything. But you know what? On the piano behind me over here, our listeners can't see, but Michael can, is Chopin. I learn myself. I love classical music and I know the importance of sight reading technique, all of that stuff. So we are not saying that's not important. We're just saying you don't have to do it first up.
Yeah, and there's an important distinction there to build on your point is people always think reading music or even music theory, for example, when they say, I want them to read music, do you mean reading the music? Do you mean reading the score or the lead sheet? Do you mean just being able to read the timing and rhythm values? Do you mean sight reading? Sight reading and reading music, I would say, are two different things. Yes, you need to be able to read music to sight read, but sight reading is a particular skill which would be employed by certain players in professional contexts more often than not, like studio musicians or orchestral kind of performers. It's still a very helpful skill to have when someone just puts music down in front of you. But learning how to read a chord chart is still a valid form of learning how to read music. But that is often overlooked for a lot of people who never learn how to play chords, which kind of leads me into we could go on to another point about other mistakes that people are making is using like a linear method. So I generally say a linear guitar method is where you buy guitar book number 1 and you start with lesson 1 and the next week you do lesson 2 and the next week you do lesson 3 and you just progress until the student either quits or you finish the book. With most people, unfortunately, the students quit well before they ever finish the book. And, then if you finish book number 1, you go on to book number 2. And with guitar playing, it's generally just melodies and nursery rhymes and sight reading and folk songs and things like that. Then when you get to book number 2, you get a few more of those across all 6 strings, except maybe you've gone from the first 3 frets of the guitar to fret number 5. But unfortunately, Again, most students don't make it to that point, but you get someone who's done 2 or 3 years of exams and maybe even general guitar lessons, and then you ask them to play a chord and they're completely dumbfounded. They're like, what's a chord? And the others inverse, you get more pop-based teachers who will only teach chords and songs, and then you go, right, now it's time to solo, or now it's time to play with someone else, and they've got no timing, no musical communication or coordination skills. So anytime you're teaching in a linear approach where you take one skill and you just go in a straight direction, it leads to massive, massive imbalances in almost all the other skills. And a genre like classical guitar, for example, there's not really any creativity or improvisation within the whole genre, and stylistically that's a stylistic thing. But to think that what I would say is one of the 7 key elements of teaching guitar or guitar playing in general is missing from an entire genre when it doesn't have to be because of linear approaches is just, the system is setting students up for failure and to be less of a musician than they could otherwise be if we just educated them differently in the beginning.
And so for the guitar teachers listening who are like, well, what do I teach instead? Then thankfully Michael has created a number of resources for teachers, many of which he'll be sharing inside Top Music Pro. He also has some of his own programs too, and I know he'll be sharing bits and pieces of those to our members, both on the blog as well, because we want to share this as widely as possible. We want as many teachers in the world to teach as creatively and be as holistic as possible. I think, Michael, that's really what we're talking about. Not the linear approach ends up being, I can't remember the word you used, but it just misses the holistic side of everything it means to be a player. On piano, for me, that's missing improvising and playing with other instruments and singing while you play and learning lead sheets and all that kind of stuff. The classical approach just bypasses all of that. And yeah, you're left with kids who don't know how to play Happy Birthday or be able to improvise or jam along and keep in time with some other players. So I'm right in alignment with you.
And the solution to that is obviously going with a geometric guitar method or any kind of geometric method. So I'm going to list out my 7 key areas of guitar playing for all the listeners, but this is easily adaptable to any other instrument. So what is a geometric method? It basically means we're learning in all of the areas at the same time. And we don't necessarily have to do all 7 in one go, although it stops you developing any gaps or any lack of knowledge in your playing. But it also allows you to cover a lot more ground and will make you a lot more fulfilled musician in the long term. So what do I mean by geometric? All of our areas. And our 7 key areas, number 1 is lead guitar playing, so anything to do with single notes, melody playing, solos and licks. Number 2 is rhythm guitar playing, which is basically to do with your chords, your strumming patterns, your timing, things like that. Number 3 is your fretboard knowledge, so knowing where the notes are, knowing how we arrange our notes into scales. From the scales, we draw our chords and our arpeggio shapes and how that all ties together on the instrument. Number 4, I think we're up to number 4, is your repertoire. So, having songs and study pieces that you work on, because that's really, really important. Number 5 is your music theory, because ultimately, if you don't understand the music theory, then you're just a parrot that's repeating things or rote learning. So being able to truly talk and understand what's going on, which is facilitated by understanding the fretboard, and knowing where all the notes and scales are, is critical. And anyone who doesn't teach music theory is doing themselves and their students a really big disservice. It's like having the treasure map. If I say, hey, Tim, I've buried treasure on the footy oval out there, the football oval, here's a shovel, go dig, you might find it in 5 minutes, you might find it in 5 weeks. But if I go, hey, Tim, I buried some treasure, here's a shovel, here's a map, X marks the spot, you're going to have a clear path to find exactly what you're looking for. And that's what I think is missing from a lot of people who are skeptical of music theory or ignorant to the benefits of it, often make the mistake of. So we can add that as one of our mistakes. But number 6 is musicianship skills. So I differentiate being able to sight read, having good timing, having your ear training and skills like that from music theory, just as it's a small differentiation, but it's more the practical application and things that help you become a better musician through those means. And the last one, of course, is creativity. And this is something that really tripped me up and is probably a reason why I have such a strong emphasis on creativity in the beginning, is because often guitar players, the teacher will go, all right, we're going to get you to learn this, this, and this. And after 3 or 4 years, now you can be creative. And all of a sudden they can do this at this level. They can do that at level 5 or 6, but their creativity is at level 0. And all of a sudden they feel, I don't like this. I'm not going to practice it because I suck at it, kind of thing. So it can be really demotivating for the student whenever they find a gap in their playing, like creativity. For me, as I mentioned in part number 1 of this series, is I went from being the best Eddie Van Halen guitar shredder kid at my high school who could do all this amazing lead guitar playing things to doing a jazz course. Sorry, Siri, hush. To doing a jazz course. And then, I went from being a really good player in all these technical aspects to having no creativity skill and not knowing my fretboard well enough to navigate the changes in jazz and to apply the music theory to being the worst guitar player in the 20 or so of us that were at my university degree. So that was a very rude awakening. And had I just been trained from the start to be creative with something as simple as having your teacher, give you a key and tell you to put random numbers in order and then play it back to them and say, hey, you wrote a song. That's creativity. Clapping a rhythm and making it into a strum pattern is creativity. And you can do that from the very first lesson with most people.
I would love to put together a one-page cheat sheet on the 7 stages. Can we share one of those, do you think, with our listeners?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And as I said, to build up on your point about the whole method kind of thing, method is Guitar Ninjas. It was primarily the curriculum for Melbourne Guitar Academy, which we use for all our students. And then, of course, what I've now done is made it into a leveling system with different colored karate belts with their guitar straps, so that basically students finish a book, they get upgraded to a new guitar strap. It's got the gamification, but it's based around these 7 key areas of guitar playing where the student in level 1 gets the foundational level 1 principle of each of those 7 areas. And in level 2, then they move on to the yellow belt, and then they get to the next level of those 7 key areas. And the methods run in a way that, some students are going to take off because they really like riffs or they really like chord progressions. They'll get stronger in certain areas, but we don't go to level 10 in one area and be at level 0 at all the others.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of the belts being the straps. That's cool. Can't do that on piano.
Well, the correct answer is, how can I do that on piano?
How can I do that on piano?
Little different wristbands like that.
Yeah. I've actually seen that done by other people too. Sheet Music Plus is the home of the world's largest selection of sheet music. Offering more than 2 million titles, you'll find everything you need for your students, for yourself, and for every group you play with. Shop songbooks, classical repertoire, and piano methods all conveniently shipped to your front door. At Sheet Music Plus, you can also choose from hundreds of thousands of digital scores that you can download and play instantly, perfect for lessons and last-minute needs. And best of all, teachers are eligible to get 8% cash back on all purchases with the Sheet Music Plus Easy Rebates program. Shop today at sheetmusicplus.com. Let's talk. You mentioned gamification. Any other thoughts on that in a way that teachers could try out some gamification ideas in lessons in the coming kind of weeks after listening to this? I know we mentioned a little bit last week, but is there anything specific to guitar?
Yeah, I would say if you make your own worksheets, what you should do is at the top of every worksheet, from this point onwards, you put 3 boxes. One is for started, so when you tick it, you write started, and then you have a tick for finished, and you have a tick for shown my teacher. And something as simple as putting 3 ticks on a page encourages students to get a tick is going to be really, really worthwhile. And something we do in Guitar Ninjas is there's actually, I think, 10 ticks for almost every study piece. And obviously the first tick is just being able to learn the piece. The second tick is being able to play the piece. And then the next 7 to 10 are different challenges to make sure that they can go back and do them. And I'm sure a lot of you listening will go, you know what, I really hate it when my students spend 6 months learning a piece and then once they've showed it to me, they never play it again, they forget it. So part of what we do is say, all right, well, you don't have to do 10 challenges before you move to the next song, but you should do at least 5 of them. And then what happens after you've done 5 challenges, you go to the next song, but you also, as part of your practice for that week, is you have to do the 6th challenge. And the week after that, you do the 7th challenge. So the student finished the song 5 weeks ago, but they're still actively practicing it for another 5 weeks, with challenges eliciting specific skills such as, doing it with your eyes shut or standing up or with a metronome or recording yourself, do it on a video to send to me so that you're not nervous. So there's all these extra things which are valuable skills that we're training the students to have, but we're doing it through a gamified approach. So just setting little challenges is something you can do instantly. And if you're doing group lessons and you've got 3 people learning and one person who's a superstar student is always finished in 1 minute and another one needs a lot of extra attention because they're brand new, the one who can do it in 1 minute, you just go, all right, can you do it this way? Can you do it standing up? Can you do it 10 times in a row? can you do it 100 times in a single lesson, something like that. So whatever your imagination opens up is basically what you can challenge these guys on. So checklists are absolutely fantastic for lessons and tracking student progress, as well as just these little challenge incentives to make gamification so much more prevalent in your lessons and rewarding for the students. And if it works with kids, it works with adults as well.
Yeah, and I think the key point there is that there is a written physical checklist. If you don't have something on a screen or whatever it is, something that is ticked and they can see progress. I think that's really crucial. It's amazing how effective a progress bar on a website is for me, making me go, oh, okay, I'm at step 2 out of 3. All right, I'll do the third step kind of thing. And it's the same approach here, but it's not just coming up with the challenges. It's about having a checklist that they can tick it off as they go.
Yeah, and the experience bar is something we put on most of our worksheets and handouts, and it is absolutely fantastic. And a student will meander through the first 7 levels or first 7 points on that experience meter, and when they're down to the last 10 or 20%, that's when they just practice like no tomorrow to make sure they get that completed and level up. So that's a really crucial element. And as a little bit of a freebie, we've already got this one worked out. I will be including a gamified practice checklist as one of the downloads. You just have to look up the appropriate article. I think it's basically 5 ways you can get your students to practice at home. I think that's what it's going to be titled, but you can look on the TopMusicPro Guitar blog when it comes out. But there's going to be a practice sheet which has actually got a 30-day practice challenge for your students in the beginning. And basically there's a couple of different rewards, both intrinsically and real life, that you can use to motivate them. And that would probably be a good little segue to another problem is teachers don't condition or establish the expectation of practice being a daily habit in the first month. And that's something which is crucial. They often say habits take 28 to 30 days to establish. Teachers try and get students to practice for an hour a day from day one, when what you should be doing is giving them a worksheet, which you can download from the blog when we put it up there, is a worksheet which just has 30 boxes on it. And every day they practice, they put a tick. If they can go 30 days in a row, and again, if they make a mistake because they missed day number 6, it's not a big deal. But if you actually have that as a challenge, you need to do 7 days in a row, and that's something they work towards, then they're probably going to work towards it. So for the first month, you just want to encourage them to play guitar for 5 minutes every day. And if they're like, oh, I can't do that, go, yep, you need to have your guitar out of its case, or do the bed trick. And the bed trick is where you put your guitar on your bed when you wake up. That way you have to pick it up for at least 5 minutes before you go to bed at the end of the night.
Oh, nice. I like it.
And then what happens once they're practicing every day, you go, all right, now you're going to do 10 minutes, or now you're going to do 15 minutes, and then you just build it up and extend it. But if you go straight to, you need to do 2 hours a day because that's what I did, then you're setting them up for failure, and then they'll feel bad because they're not doing it, which will lead them to them not coming to their lessons because they don't want to disappoint you. And once they've skipped 1 or 2 lessons, then it's basically really, really hard to turn it around after that point.
Yeah, it's amazing how my 2 kids as well, they're 11 and 13, and they really respond to doing streaks of whatever it is. So whether it's a Snapchat thing, like they're doing it every day, or whether it's going for a run every day, but they've got to do it every single day. And it's kind of a challenge that they set themselves. It's quite interesting. But yeah, you're saying exactly the same thing. Let's get them doing that for their lessons from day one, but make it achievable. 5 minutes is all they need. We're just building a habit here. We're not building a classical musician's performing musician's habit of 2 hours a day or 10 hours a day or whatever it is. I really like those ideas, Michael. Thank you very much for sharing them. And we've covered a heap of mistakes and ground there as well. But were there any other mindset shifts that you feel guitar teachers should consider that we haven't mentioned already?
There was one I was thinking of. It's going to elude me right now as we think of it. In terms of mistakes and mindset shifts, the last little mistake I'd make, which ties into the linear method, is basically trying to teach everyone the same way, having a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is your mindset shift, is not everyone learns the same way. Everyone's different. You need a dynamic approach. So there are guitar teachers that just straight up don't teach kids because they find them frustrating or annoying or difficult to teach, when, if you teach a kid like an adult or a teenager or even a 6-year-old compared to a 12-year-old, there's just dramatic differences in maturity and life priorities and things like that. So if you teach kids at the capacity and redefine what does success look like for a 6-year-old, like if the kid eats mud and picks his nose and eats his boogers kind of thing, then you've got a really low bar for success. Whereas if someone is, a successful professional with multi-hours of free time a day, then you want to go with that one as well. So with the kids, success is having fun, getting them to pick up the guitar a couple of times, and that they're enthusiastic about coming to their lessons because they have fun. That's what success is, and you just try and get some results within that field. With 12-year-olds, it might be getting them to have 3 songs to perform at the end of the year. With an adult student, it might, it's whatever they define as success to them. But not having a one-size-fits-all approach and changing your approach to be able to make success for each student and get the most out of the program for them and help them achieve what they need.
Mm. I want to change tack slightly, and that's to private versus group. You've got some views on that. I know certainly in our first episode you talked about how you built huge numbers of students by doing groups. What's your feeling about that for guitar teachers today?
I just think that if you only teach private lessons because that's the way it's being done and you've never questioned whether it's the best way to go about it, then you're doing yourself a real disservice because you're not going to be able to make anywhere near as much money as you potentially can, but also for the fact that, not everyone is conducive to one-on-one learning, and not everyone is. There's just so many things I could go on about with the private lessons. I think privates are really great, and for certain kinds of students that learn better in isolation, that are going to be your 2 or 3 hours of a day practice kind of students, then they might be better suited to private lessons or should have a private lesson in conjunction with their group lesson. But most people, how did you learn in primary school? You learned in a classroom with 30 people. How did you learn in high school? You learned in a classroom with 30 people. How did you learn at university? You learned in a classroom of 30 to 200 people. How did you learn your music? Like at university, I did 24 contact hours, 23 of which were in groups and ensembles, and 1 hour was private lessons. What does that tell you about the private lessons? Either they're not as good, or that they're a bad way of making money, so that all the educational institutions have to leverage it over the group. So I say you should have private lessons, and if you teach them, there's nothing wrong with that, but don't just teach them because that's what you think it's the way it should be. A lot of people aren't coming to guitar to learn guitar, they're coming for a connection. So if you have a group, they're automatically making new friends and are exposed to a social group. Most of us blokes, men for you American guys, once we stop playing sport and hanging around at the local football club, there goes our immediate peer group. So the amount of people we have in our program in that 45 to 60-year-old male range who get so much fulfillment from coming to their lessons, talking with the other boys, talking about guitar and sport, and everyone has the same musical taste, believe it or not, then it's the highlight of their week because they get to be part of a group and part of a family. And with kids, it's much of the same thing. Some kids are going to be good at sport. Some people are going to be good at video games. Some people are going to be good at art. There's going to be people who are good at music and want to connect with other people that are good at music and want people they can play with and jam with. And you can't do that in a private lesson. So the private lesson function is severely limiting to a lot of real world applications. How often do you go to not so much with piano, because piano it's a bit more common because you have lead and rhythm, but on a guitar, really are you doing just solo gigs? Normally you're accompanying a singer or you're playing in a band. So by learning in a group, you're setting yourself up for the same format that you would long-term be playing and performing within the context of a group. And of course, there's the bonus of you can just make so much more money teaching group lessons, which ties into another perspective shift, is that group lessons aren't worth as much money as private lessons. Something that I do is go, are you paying for time? Are you paying for a result? Or are you paying for, the third one escapes me, I'll come up with it, but a lot of people go, all right, my time's worth $50 an hour, so I'm going to charge $50 an hour, and that's all you get. Whereas I like to go, well, we're the best guitar school in all of Australia, and we're going to turn you into a fantastic guitar player. What do you want to be? You want to be this? Okay. You need to do A, B, C. If you come to your lesson and you do exactly what we say and practice this at home, there's a 100% guarantee you will achieve that. The only reason that will ever get mucked up is if you quit or you don't do what you're saying to do. But we'll do we'll uphold our end of the bargain. All you need to do is keep coming to lessons and practice what we tell you to practice. 100% success rate. And then, that obviously sounds really professional and targeted and streamlined. And then, of course, people will pay a premium. They rock up and go, oh, it's a group lesson. I go, well, yeah, it is a group lesson. And they go, oh, well, I didn't think it was going to be group. It's like, There's nothing I can't teach you in a group lesson that I can teach you in a private. It's like teaching is teaching. But if you're going to be practicing for 30 minutes, and this goes into the whole training versus teaching kind of thing. If I teach you something, I don't want you to work on it for 5 minutes and I teach you something else and something else and something else, and then you've forgotten the first thing. I want to teach you something and I want to give you 5 minutes to consolidate that while I help the other two people in the group. And then I come back and I give you the next step, and then I help the other two people, and I come back and I give you the next step. If it's a one-on-one lesson and I'm just staring you down because I'm watching you and weighing you, it's going to be very, very intimidating. And if you haven't practiced for the week, you're not going to feel really good about coming up and fronting up and having to tell me you haven't practiced. So again, there's that likelihood that you might just avoid coming. And if you do that, I'll practice twice as much next week. And then all of a sudden they don't practice twice as much. They don't practice at all. And then they go 3 weeks out practice, by week number 4, they're never coming back. So, and all of a sudden, if that's a private lesson, you've got a gap in your schedule and you're not getting paid. Whereas if you're getting group lessons, then all of a sudden, one person doesn't show up, not a big deal, but they're not going to avoid the group because they've got friends in the group. They love getting to play and jam with other people, and it's actually really low pressure. And for anyone who's ever sat in a room with a teacher and they play it perfectly at home and then go and play it for you and you can't play it because you're all nervous, that pretty much goes away because you don't have to play with people watching you 100%. You sort of just, mold into the background.
Mm. Yeah, there's plenty of parallels with piano because one of the challenges of piano, because it is both a solo instrument and a group instrument, probably more so a solo instrument in many ways, a lot of piano students do struggle to play along with other instruments unless they are exposed to that as an accompanist or in group lessons. And so I've long advocated for teachers, if they don't teach in groups, which is fine. I know there's more of a tradition perhaps in other instruments than piano for group teaching. If they don't teach in groups, then at least run group sessions every now and then, every month or term or whatever it is, where students can play together, duets, trios, 2-piano stuff. I mean, it's just so much fun. Or playing along with other instruments. You get that sense of rhythm and you learn about ensemble playing and all those things that you've been talking about for guitar, as well as the friendship aspect and motivation. So, yeah, totally understand what you're saying there. How big are your groups generally, Michael?
It really does depend. Obviously, we generally go for about 6. With the more advanced players, I've done workshops and seminars for advanced players where we're doing, it was a 2-day event and there was 20 people in the room, and I would just give a topic, and then for the next 15 minutes, I would just walk around and make sure everyone had it. And then it was like a training event kind of thing. I probably taught for 5 minutes to every hour and then trained and observed and gave feedback for the remainder of the time. And that worked great with 20 people. And I've also been a trainer at an event over in the USA where there was 200 people in a room, and I was, one of 4 or 5 teachers, and we'd walk around. So, that was about a 40-to-1 teacher to student ratio, and it worked fine. So if you can't teach groups effectively, it's because there's a problem with how you're running it. And just because 3 years ago, when you're a much less experienced teacher, you struggled with group lessons, doesn't mean that there's a better way of doing it that might work way better for you now. All you need to do is have the right formula and the right recipe for success. And group, I would never go back to sole private lessons. Out of our over or almost 200 students, we probably teach less than 10 in private lessons. And we have VCE, I don't know what the American equivalent is, but basically when you finish high school and do your guitar playing, we had the highest scorer in a state in 2016. He did group lessons. I've got, if you look on my website or our social media, I've got like 11 and 12-year-old guys who are super into heavy metal playing really extreme, really fast stuff. We're talking like 180 to 200 beats a minute, 16th note stuff, and they're like 11 and 12 coming through group lessons. So there is nothing that you can do in a private that you can't do in a group. The only difference is that individualized, personalized attention, which most people aren't necessarily after. And then that third thing I said, people pay you for price, they pay you for a result, but they can also pay you for an experience. And that's where doing things like a band workshop, if you are doing private lessons, but you can put together a band or some ensemble stuff, people will pay for experiences as well.
I did a pop showcase. That was something that I blogged about and recorded videos about a few years ago when I had a number of pop students. And so I got a band together of teachers at my school at that stage to play along with these kids and jam with them on, whatever it was. It was Beatles and Avicii and all sorts of stuff. And it was the coolest experience. They absolutely loved it. Just that ability to, that experience of playing along with other instruments it's just, it's part of music, really. And I do miss, in some ways, I'm not in any bands. I used to do a lot of musical theatre where I played in pit orchestras and things. And yeah, that camaraderie and the fun that you have playing along with other instruments, you just can't get it any other way. So yeah, I'm fully supportive of that idea of the group teaching being just as, if not more so, more successful than private lessons. So, Michael, I think we're coming towards the end of our 3-part series. It's been absolutely magic hanging out with you, and I can't wait for our formal launch, which is going to be coming up, of the Guitar Music Pro program that you've been working so hard on, and the whole team's been putting together behind the scenes. Before we go, is there anything we've missed that is important to cover just for guitar teachers before we finish up this episode?
I think if I could just say one thing, it's to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. So again, if you're a little bit out of touch with teaching because to you it was a means of getting a bit of income on the side, or your music career is a main goal, I'd be saying no, you need to really shift your perspective and realize that you have a responsibility for your students and you have the power to change someone's life. I'm here because I had a teacher who captured my motivation and made me believe that anything was possible and that I could go off and do anything. And probably every other person listening to this has that memorable teacher to set them on the right path.
Michael, I think that's a great note to finish on. We might just leave it there. Thank you so much again for the 3-part series.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure, and I really look forward to working with you, working with all those people. And if they're interested, make sure they check out our upcoming Top Music Pro Guitar course. Jump on the mailing list, tell every guitar player or guitar teacher you know, and we're basically going to go really, really deep into everything that we've talked about. We're going to have systems for setting up a guitar business. We're going to have all the stuff that I use in Melbourne Guitar Academy, my processes for teaching and the psychology of learning, and a whole bunch of cool stuff on gamification so that, you can create the life that you want and be the teacher that you want to be. And if that means you're just, teaching part-time and funding your music career, or you're making 6 figures teaching guitar or anything in between, it's about how can we equip you with the tools you need to be the best guitar player you can be, the best guitar teacher you can be, and to create the life of wealth, of freedom, of abundance for yourself so that you and your family can be the best versions of yourself possible.
Sounds super cool. Can't wait to make it happen. We'll speak to you soon, Michael. Well, today's episode is over and the 3-part series concludes. I hope you've enjoyed meeting our new head of guitar, Michael Gumley. We could talk for hours and hours, as you can tell, and enjoy really diving into so many aspects of pedagogy and business. Michael just comes with a huge wealth of experience and knowledge, and he's done an amazing amount of research, both into that entrepreneurial side of business side of music teaching, and also deep into the pedagogy. And really, as you heard from today, so many wonderful ideas and ways that we can help you grow. Now, if you've missed anything, then head over to our show notes page. That's topmusic.co/episode 256 for downloads and links and everything that you need to get started. Definitely go and check out our blog as well. Michael has started releasing lots of cool stuff for guitar teachers now over on our blog. You can find that at topmusic.co. And don't worry, piano teachers, we're still here for you as well. We're not leaving you behind. We're continuing to support you and provide as much content as we can, as always, for our piano teachers. But now, very excitingly, starting to add the guitar stream. Now, you're going to hear again from Michael in a few weeks when we actually launch the new program. So please, if you do know any guitar teachers out there, as I said right at the start of this whole process, I've had so many people request, where's my Top Music Pro? Where's my community? Where's my tribe of music teachers that I can connect with online and learn from and get training from? Where are they? Unfortunately, there's not a lot if you're not a piano teacher. So that is set to change, and I can't wait to introduce you to the new program when Michael comes back on the show to launch Top Music Pro Guitar. Until then, we'll speak to you really, really soon. Thanks again for listening. I hope you got a lot out of today's episode, and I'll see you next time. For more information about this episode and to find out how to enhance your own teaching, visit topmusic.co. You'll find everything you need for your studio, from lesson plans to cheat sheets, quick win teaching ideas, and guides on how to build your teaching business. Plus, you'll be connected to a global community of the world's top music teachers. And when you're ready, join hundreds of other teachers around the world by becoming a Top Music Pro member and get access to all our bonus content and flagship courses. And don't forget to follow topmusic.co on social media and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. That's all for today. We'll see you in the studio.